Welcome, everybody. So John and we're doing tech in a new site, and it didn't go as smoothly as I had thought. I think that everything is working okay, but it might not be. But it didn't go quickly, so that's why we're eating food and kind of catching up. So if we seem a little bit uh, less relaxed than normal, that can be why. So welcome, everyone. Um, and you know how to make this clicker work, so it's right now not behaving.
Forget how we did that.
Yeah.
Maybe in PowerPoint.
Oh, there you go.
I think I clicked it.
Okay, you did. Okay, so I've got some club announcements that first, um, and then we'll move into the smallmouth talk. So first of all, next month, it will be May the 6th, here in this very room, we'll be welcoming George Daniel to speak. And he'll be talking on Flyfishing Evolution, which is his new book. He has a talk that has been going around the fly fishing shows, and he's been doing it nationally. And so he's going to be here to do it. That meeting is our spring kind of major meeting that we uh, uh, host with Leon Chandler, our friends in Ithaca. So we share the costs of the speaker, and we go back and forth. So this is our turn to host, and so we picked this venue, and so come on back May 6th to hear George Daniel. He will be selling books. So if you want to get that book, come here and he'll sign it for you. If you happen to own it already, bring your book and he'll sign it for you. Big doings is we're getting really cranked to do our Fly Fishing Academy. We'll be doing this May 4 at Bill Wirtz's lake. Bill, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, so just to give everybody,
You want to give him a mic?
Oh, yeah.
who's out there, in fact, I was warned of others that might be out there. So encourage friends of yours, people that you know are interested to register so that we can get the count early. Quite honestly, to my way of thinking, we're a little bit behind in terms of registered students at this time before the academy. Last year, we were filled up a month before the academy. So at this time, we had no openings. Now we have 16 openings that I know of. So,
Did
okay,
you turn that mic on?
22.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Mhm. Well, we're waiting. So,
So we've got 6 registered. If you know students, that's a big need right now. Pretty soon we'll be getting a little more focused on getting the staff and agenda and all that planned.
but we're planning for success, and as it says up there, the academy is May 4th. With that.
So the good part about May 4th is it's a little later in the year and it's been a warmer spring. So our hope is the fish will be a little more cooperative than they have in the past. So it should be a really good combination. So pass the word, would you? It's the most effective way to get students is by inviting them. All right. We have fly rod raffle going on. Vince has tickets here tonight. If you'd like to buy them tonight. If you're the online kind of person, you just hit the QR code and it takes you right to the online raffle purchasing through PayPal. And the winner will be drawn at the May meeting. You win choice of any fly rod that TFO makes, including the two-handed rods. So if you need, everybody needs one of those rods. So it can be a real win. Okay, fishing trips are going to be cranking up here. We're hitting spring, and first one is at the end of April, and then we have the Cayuga and Genesee trip. Anything you want to add, Mr. Scheffler?
We have a couple others that may come. The Rainbow Paradise trip hasn't been settled yet, and the Chemung float hasn't been settled yet. So those may come and add to this list later on.
Yeah.
But until then, right now, this is what we have.
Cool. So we should see those hit in the email here shortly. And so the spring and fishing trips start. This is a great way if you are unfamiliar with a watershed, or you're new to fly fishing, or you just want to have fun. What we try to do is, if you're new to fly fishing or you're new to the watershed, we're going to pair you up with somebody who knows it really well. And so it's a great way to get introduced to the water. It's a great way to get introduced to other club members and connect that way. And most club members are really generous in showing you their tricks. Oh, by the way, the Cayuga trip, only they're limiting to 10 people. So if you're interested in that one, you want to sign up as soon as you can. Lastly, just to fill out the whole program, we have the casting night is scheduled for June the 2nd, and that's going to be at Kinsilla Park. We have the park reserve. Chaz and Dave will be leading that. So you have a certified casting instructor and a almost nationally known casting instructor who will be helping out. So that's a really good event to go to if you are an advancing fly fisher and you want to work on some techniques, or if you're a new fly caster, or if you have a buddy who's new, bring them along to casting night. So if you're a Twin Tiers Five Rivers member, you got an email from me announcing that I have served as the president now for 16 and a half years. And so I decided that I'm not going to run in June when we have officer election. And Vince Leonard, who served on the board for 8 years as our treasurer and has done loads of work, has decided he's not going to run. And Dick Naylor is retiring off the board after 15 years. So we are losing 40 years of board experience in June. So we have established a club futures team that Bill Wirtz is here tonight. Vince Leonard is here tonight. I don't know if Jim is on the call, but they're heading up for us and looking for candidates for president, VP, and treasurer, and also for board members. And so people are coming forward. That process is moving forward, and So stay tuned. But if you are inclined to help the club, you have time and skills to help the club really needs you. It's we're going to go through a period of renewal. We're going to reimagine what we are as a club, and we're looking for people who want to be part of that whole process. Just a few things. If you're not subscribed to our emails already, QR code to do that. We send emails out to 400 and some people. We have like 70 some club members about our programs, fishing trips, and other things that are going on. Also, a good way to connect to us is through our Facebook page. There's a QR code that connects to that. By the way, these meetings are all recorded, and so you can go to our YouTube channel and come back and hit that QR code if you choose, which is what that slide just said. We have a YouTube channel where all the recordings of our meetings are held. Just a reminder that if you join our club, you have to be a member of FFI. That all that money goes to national. We don't see a penny of it. All that we do is supported by the generosity of people that are members and people that are in the fly fishing community that support us. One way to do that is through the rod raffle. And we hope that you'll buy some tickets and help the club. And you can donate. So this is weird. I was going to ask Vince to do this, but I was just like, okay, that was too, we didn't get it. We were distracted. So normally I introduce the speaker and it's weird that it's me, right? So if let's see, what can I tell you about me that you don't know? So I started fly fishing when I was 10 years old. I actually started fly tying through the Boys Life magazine. I thought the Royal Coachman looked like a doable thing. So they had a photo layout in Boys Life on how to tie a Royal Coachman. I didn't have a vise, but I had a machinist vise. I didn't have fly tying thread, but I had sewing thread. I didn't have golden pheasant, crest feathers for the tail or anything like that. But my dad hunted, so I had pheasant feathers. And nobody told me that those flies shouldn't catch fish, but they shouldn't have, but they did. And the rest is history. I'm a life member of TU and FFI. I've been the president since 2008. I had a career with Corning. I was an engineer, worked there for 37 years. So that's a little bit about me. But I want to talk tonight about fly fishing for smallmouth. I fly fish whenever I can. I've had the great fortune to have fly fished literally all over the world. I fish saltwater, I fish trout, I fish all kinds of crazy things. I fished for Amago in Japan. I've been to Argentina before. So I've just been really blessed and I really enjoy the variety that fly fishing in all its forms. I've had the opportunity to Atlantic salmon fish in the Gas Bay with Bill Kessler, who is, I consider, an expert, and I'm fortunate enough that I'm going to go again in June. But my first love is smallmouth bass. The smallmouth bass are such a voracious fighter and they're such a predator that one of my sayings, if you've been on my boat, is if I ever go to a bar fight, I'm taking a smallmouth bass with me. So what I want to talk about tonight is I've got a lot to say about smallmouth, and but I'm going to cover it. I'm going to try to go through briskly. I'm going to count on your questions. So those of you online, if you've got questions, John's kind of keeping an eye on the chat. So ask your question on chat or go off on mute and ask the question. Those of you in the room, same thing. Because I know this stuff really well, but I might have said something that wasn't so clear. What I'm going to talk about is the agenda here is talk about this, how the smallmouth revolve around the seasons, what they eat, and then how that affects how we fish for them. In amongst all that, I'm going to be throwing you loads of what I've learned about smallmouth that will make you hopefully more successful when you fish for them. And it's going to be littered throughout the talk. So a good place to start when you're talking about smallmouth is that their behavior revolves around the spawn. Like a lot of fish, their behavior revolves around the spawn. For smallmouth, they spawn when the water temperature hits 62 to 64 degrees. The largemouth, by the way, are just a couple degrees more. For us in our area, that let me go back there. The spawn occurs in about the middle of May. I'll talk more about that in a bit. So what we're going to refer to is everything on the spawn. There's pre-spawn and post, the summer season, fall, and winter. Let me lead you through that first. So pre-spawn is occurring now. And it will occur until the water temperatures hit 62. Believe it or not, the time to fish for bass is pre-spawn. When the water is getting above 55, the fish begin to move, and they're going to move towards their spawning sites. The bite can be solid. Sometimes it can be really aggressive. It is the time of the year, if you want to catch a big fish, pre-spawn is the time. As the temperatures move towards 62, these fish are going to start getting into a spawning mode where they're going to move into the spawning areas and then get aggressive in defending them. Okay? So when the water hits 62 in our area, it's between early and mid-May. This year, it might be early May, since it's been so warm. But throughout all of US and Canada, that spawn is going to distribute somewhere between April and July, depending. If you're really far north, it's July. If you're really far south, it's April. Now, for the spawn, the bass go in littoral areas. What's that mean? That's a fancy word. The bass need gravel and rocks, preferably the size of quail eggs to fist. Okay, that's the area. Those are the rocks they need to spawn. They need low or no current, so frog water. Okay, they don't spawn in moving water, and that they have to have sunlight to have the eggs develop. So the nest has to have those three things, whether it be lake or rivers. Okay, so in lakes, those generally they're going to spawn in deeper areas. Okay, they may spawn where there's a shelf, a reef, or they can go into trips, right? And we know that well. The Great Lakes all have tremendous runs of smallmouth bass that come in and spawn in the trips. Our Finger Lakes have tremendous runs that come off the lake and spawn in the trips. And when they're going to spawn in moving water, rivers, streams, they're going to go where it's low current or no current. We're talking back channels, eddies, seams, protected areas. They're not going to be in moving water. And they're going to start to spawn in the areas which reach that trigger temperature first. What's that mean? If you go in the Chemung River, okay, and there's fish that are spawning in a back channel, the shallow back channel is going to warm first. They're going to be the first to spawn, okay? It might be 2 or 3 weeks until the spawn occurs in the main river, but it's going to occur in those back channels first. So you got to know where to look. So the as the fish get near spawn, the mature fish will move into the spawning area. By the way, smallmouth bass will try to spawn 100 feet from where they spawned last. Okay, so and I've seen it stated, but I'm not sure if it's true that they try to spawn where they were born. But I do know that it's true that they will spawn. They come back to the same place every year. Important to know. By the way, in smallmouth culture, the male does the work. So the male builds a nest. The females come and impart their eggs to the nest. And usually they will mate with several males. And then the male hangs around and guards the nest until those fry disperse. If you go into some of the lakes, those spawn areas can get defended, especially the ones that have gobies. The males will defend that nest until the fry are gone. They could be there for several weeks. If you go in the river, I'm not sure why, but they don't seem to care. They kind of spawn and they don't hang around that nest real long. And I've seen that to be highly variable. Sometimes you'll see them on the nest for, I'll float a section, the next day I float, the fish are gone. I don't know why that is. I've just seen it. And I said before that the Great Lakes and Finger Lakes spawn fishing on the tribs can be amazing. And a lot of people don't know about it. So pre-spawn, these fish are moving in. When the steelhead move out, the smallmouth are moving in. This pre-spawn, the smallmouth can be really aggressive. And so it can be a really good time to go on a Great Lakes trib or a Finger Lakes trib. You got to be stealthy though. All right, we're going through the seasons. What's interesting is that a couple weeks after spawn, it's called this post-spawn funk. And it's 2 or 3 weeks after spawn, generally in early June. And the bite can be stupid hard. The fish will move into deep water to recover. They'll move away from feeding areas. And my advice to you is to keep looking and trying different areas. Some of the bass will be onto normal behavior. Some will be hanging out in spawning areas. Some will be sulking in deep water. But post-spawn, it can be really frustrating. You'll be pre-spawn. You think you're a hero. You go right into spawn, same thing. And then all of a sudden, the lights turn out. in the post spawn. So summertime is when most people think about smallmouth fishing. And around here, what makes it fun is that the bass's metabolism is cranked to its highest. So they're eating more frequently, and they can be really, really aggressive. So this can be the great time to go with your tennis shoes down in the riffles, and you can hammer smallmouth. Sometimes it can be very, very cooperative. And this is the time they're going to eat topwaters. It's way fun to do. I'm not saying you can't catch big fish. You certainly can in the summertime. But you also will notice that you have to be more stealthy. In the fall, the fish are going to start getting ready for winter, and they're going to start fattening up. So we think of fall around the end of September through November. The fish are going to start to migrate toward where they winter, which is the deeper holes. The bite in the fall can be on or off. It can be, you can go out there and just, if it warms up, you have a sunny day, everybody else is hunting. You can have the whole place to yourself, and you can hammer smallmouth all day long. But it can also be really tough. But I never see anybody out in the fall. In the wintertime, the metabolism of these fish really cranks low. You can fish for smallmouth, and you got to go low and slow. Or you can do like me and switch over to the tributaries or head to Florida, or I used to tie flies in the winter, and now I gotta tie flies whenever I have time. All right, so I'm gonna move over to think about what they eat. And so smallmouth eat all kinds of stuff. So their preferred foods, so Dobson, big time preferred, the hellgrammites, crayfish, cicadas if they're around, and minnows. So let me emphasize crayfish. So crayfish can be anywhere from 60 to 90% of the smallmouth's diet. So if you're wanting to know where to get started, crayfish is the place. Now, if you happen to live on the Great Lakes, I've got the exception. The goby exception is the smallmouth have figured out that the gobies are a great food source. So that if gobies are around, the smallmouth are going for them, and they'll lay off on the crayfish. So they'll prefer the gobies over the crayfish. And we had that. So if you fish Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, that's something to think about. All right, let's talk about triggers. You know that I'm big on talking about triggers. It's when a smallmouth is actively feeding, it will eat anything that's hanging around where it's looking for food. Okay? And so in the times when a smallmouth is actively feeding, we often use flies that amplify the trigger. So if a fish is, an example, I was with John Lively. We're down in the Chemung River. There was a ant hatch, a winged ant hatch, and there was a rain, and it put all these ants down on the surface. We're fishing. It was just below Wellsburg. It was unbelievable. There was like 300-400 smallmouth eating those damn ants. Okay, I don't know, but ants must taste really good, because if there's ants around, the fish are like alive. Okay, so They're eating ants. Everybody knows what an ant is. I'm fishing a gurgler, a yellow gurgler. Okay. I got 100 fish that day. Okay. They ate that. Anything that's up there, look, they're triggering on, hey, I'm looking up there. There's food going by. Holy shit, what's that? Boom. Okay. When they're actively feeding. Now, what happens is when you have pressured conditions where they've really been seeing a lot of flies or they're bigger, that is, they're educated, then you have to move towards more realistic flies and presentations. So now it's more approaching like trout fishing. I think we all like smallmouth because they'll take anything, and they will if they're lit up. But the big fish that are fished after a lot, you have to be on your game. And so that's when you're wanting to get flies that look like a crayfish, that act like a crayfish, etc. Okay. One thing that's really different about smallmouth versus like trout is that color becomes really, really important, and it's a really important trigger. So in bright days, we fish with bright colors. My favorite is a yellow and chartreuse fly. On a bright day, I'll often fish a white fly. And in the case of dark days, rainy days, you want to go darker. Okay. And oh, by the way, that deceiver is a deceiver that I own that was tied by a lefty cray. And he was kind of one of my legends that I had the chance to meet a bunch of times. Okay, so let's talk about strategy. So we're going to go through this and we're going to build on it. But the important components of how to be successful is to fish where the fish are. Okay, that's kind of silly, but what this talks about is presentations to present the fly where the fish are, but there's a bit to understanding what time of the year is, where should the fish be holding, so you can target. We're going to talk way more about that. Secondly, it's all about the retrieve. It's not the fly. Okay? What really bugs me is some people, you'll post up or you'll say, oh, I caught one. And they always ask the same wrong question. What fly did you get them on? It's not the fly. I'm telling you, it's the retrieve that's way, way more important. Now, the fly kind of decodes where that fly is going to present, but how you present it is way more important than the pattern. And we're going to talk lots about this. We're going to talk tons about this. Important to understand that smallmouth eat on the pause. Trout eat on the pause. So they'll wait for it to stop, drop. That's when they get it. Now, there'll be times, and we'll go through this lots more. If the fish are chasing, metabolism are high, summertime, the fish chase. You can't get the fly away from them. It's way fun, and you can do your saltwater strip. It's fine, because you'll never get that fly away from them. But most of the time, they don't want to chase the fly. They want to pause it. They want to twitch and hover. And if the fish aren't cooperating, change the color and the size of the fly. What you want to go is when it's pressured conditions, clear water, go small and slow down the retrieve. So stealth is always important. People think that stealth is only important to trout fishing. Stealth is way, way, way important to smallmouth fishing. If you'd like to catch bigger fish, or you find that you're not catching, you just catch dinks, you gotta work on the stealth. You're scaring away the big fish. Talked a little bit. Let's talk about how they feed. And I'm going to use a term that I use in my drift boat a lot. Those of you who've been on my drift boat, you know I use the term attack point. And what I've learned is the dumb looks by people who are in the front, they don't know what an attack point is. That's not a common term. It's not their fault. I'm using some lingo they're not familiar with. So this is a section in the Palisades of the Chemung. And this is to illustrate attack point. So where do the fish hold? So they like to hold where they're sheltered from the current, okay? They can, in these back eddies like here, tight against those logs, they're sheltered from the current. Now, the attack point is where the current conveys food to them so they can be in the lounge chair watching the cafeteria line, okay? And the best attack points concentrate, the current pinches and it concentrates everything. And you might be able to see on this slide how the current is all sweeping in to that, behind that log, okay? So attack points are often places in the shoreline where there's an eddy and there's a fast water seam there. There's points where the shoreline sticks out, or there's pockets where the shoreline backs in. Those all are great places for smallmouth ambush. Smallmouth are ambush feeders. Much like trout, they hold in these attack points. They wait for something to come by, and they get them. Okay. Good attack points are structure like log jams, boulders, or shoals, islands. Okay. These are all good. Now, if you asked, well, Kirk, could you prioritize those? Kirk's experience is number one is wood. Smallmouth prefer wood. And so these are prime spots for smallmouth. They will always hang around deadfalls, always. Boulders, if there's boulders, that's smallmouth address. If there's a boulder in the stream, you throw on it, because there is a smallmouth almost guaranteed hang around that boulder. And grass beds. These are grass that's in the water, okay? Little islands and you got grass sticking out. They'll hang around those as well. And my experience is that is kind of the priority. It's not working, buddy.
Good?
No.
No?
It moved.
Yeah, I think I did that.
You did it? Here, yeah, I can do it. Okay. Now, when we talk about structure, you're on my drift boat. I say, hit the rock. I mean, hit the rock. I want that fly to land within 6 inches of the rock, and the closer it is, the better. I really want it to hit the rock. I want it to hit the structure. I want the fly to be really close. If you put it a foot off that structure, as Joe Cambridge would say, you might as well throw it in Mars, okay? They want it tight on that structure. And the, let's see, in cases where there's overhangs, another great point is under deadfalls, docks, those kind of things, overhanging tree limbs. that is a perfect place for a smallmouth to hang. You want that fly to land and twitch, preferably 90 degrees from the current. You want it to twitch. In the cases in the summertime when the fish are chasing, you can pull it out of there and they'll come and get it. Fine. Most of the time, though, you want that fly to hit and you don't want to pull it away. You want to twitch it. You want to show some life. You want to be tight to the fly. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you want it to hang in their face. Okay. So let me talk a little bit more about the smallmouth, and then we're going to get into the tactics. But here's in case there's a trivial pursuit question. Smallmouth are native only in the U.S. and only in the Mississippi watersheds. Where's the closest Mississippi watershed? The Allegheny River. They made it up there. They are not native to the Susquehanna. They're not native to the Chemung. Okay? Didn't know that. And a lot of other places where they've been stocked. Really, really important. The smallmouth can take a fly and spit it out almost faster than any fish I know of. And so they can take a fly and spit it out like that. You won't even notice it. How do we fish for them then? Is on the drift boat is perfect because we can use highly visible flies. We watch the fly, and when it disappears, you set the hook. You will never feel the take. That fly has sucked it and spit it so quick, you wouldn't believe it. So when we're fishing deep, things can get really tricky because they can grab and spit and grab and spit and grab and spit, and you might never even feel it. They have an uncanny ability to spit the fly quick. Now, this is really important. And a lot of people get frustrated in hooking bass, largemouth and smallmouth. And this is why for smallmouth. If you're not hooking these fish, pay attention. The smallmouth can crush a crayfish, and they have special mouth parts that they can crush a crayfish and kill it. Okay? They grab your fly with those vice grips, same way. So when they take that fly, they grab the fly. Okay? You do the old trout set, okay? They just leave go. They're not hooked. They just had it in their pliers. Okay? So, John, we're gonna do a little demo. It's on a hook set. Vince, can you put this around a chair or something? I don't want you to hold it, but somewhere that it's not gonna ruin anything, but all right. Okay. So when we're smallmouth fishing, the problem is this thing is a spring. Okay? In order to get a hook set on a smallmouth, if you put the spring in there, it's going to get that spring. If you've ever felt how much force that is, it's hardly nothing. It's hardly nothing when you go like this. What we need to do to get a really good hook set on this fish is take the spring out of the circuit. Okay? Notice, where's my rod pointing? Straight at the fly. I'm gonna strip set. I've got a real good grip on the line, and I'm gonna pull back hard. I'm gonna pull back, I'm gonna reef it hard. What I'm doing when I set that hook is I am trying to figure out how big that fish is. Now, there'll be times when you're gonna launch the little guy over your shoulder, but there's gonna be times when you reef down on it and you've got a 5-pounder. Now, you've got to be ready for that thing to bolt and allow the line to slip through, still with tension. But here's the trouble that people get is you got to get a really solid hook set on that. You got to pull it out of their vice grips. If you're not hooking smallmouth, my guess is either the hook's not sharp or you don't have a straight line. Okay? Now, maybe you're the kind of caster that casts, and when you cast, it's got a hook in it. Dude, you got to fix that. You got to fix that. You need that fly to land straight. When that fly hits the water, you're fishing. You're shooting line. When the fly hits the water, you've got to be ready with hook set. You got to have a straight line. So that means you got to work on casting straight. So what am I saying? If you funk up the cast and it lands in S curves, still fish it, of course, but don't pull it out of the water. But realize you really got to reef to get that line straight so you can get a real pressure on the fish. Okay? Now, and don't do the trout thing. Okay? Wait for them till you can feel the weight of the fish, and then you can raise your rod. But we're going to talk lots about this in a little bit. But the most effective way to fight a smallmouth is side pressure. You want to bend the rod here, not there. You want to bend it here, and you want to be torquing him to the side. This is also going to keep him from jumping. Okay. Cool.
Two things that cross my mind. One thing, raise the rod way up in the air so people how much slack you get.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You immediately put 10 feet of line in there. Go from straight and no slack to all slack.
Yeah,
And then they can just do this.
yeah.
The other thing is, you hard set, or reverse this way, and pull that way hard, roll the hook and go. Don't have a hard hook set, pull this way, pull this way. Pull that. Keeping the line is huge. So if you reverse it and reverse it, pull the hook.
Cool. All right. We might need this again. I don't think. Okay. So another interesting aspect of smallmouth is that they're binge eaters. So Matthew's trying to remind us of that in this photo. Have you ever caught a smallmouth and you look down his throat and there's crayfish in his throat? Like not just one, there's a bunch of them. So smallmouth are like teenagers. They just eat until they're stupid, right? And what happens is they'll eat until they're full, and then they go and sulk. They go somewhere and digest that. And their digestion time varies based on their metabolism. So when the water's cold, it might take them a week till they binge again. In the summertime, it might take a couple days. This is really important to our strategy because The ones that just binged ate, they're not interested in what we have to share. If they're still on the binge, they can have a throat full of crayfish and they'll still go for another one. Okay, so the whole mission in smallmouth is to search for the lit up fish, the feeding fish, the ones that are ready to eat. So keep moving. If where you're fishing, you're not catching fish, move. I move all the time. One of the things that helps me move is watercraft. This is where watercraft really shine, is in smallmouth fishing. So canoes, kayaks, pontoons, and this is my weapon. This is that's Matt, right? Yeah, and that's me in the front. That was a weird that I got a picture of me on the front. That's my drift boat. It's the awesome way to fish for smallmouth. It is a nirvana because you're up, you can see, you're standing, so you can get full casting distance, and you can see the fly in the water. Rafts are great too. So let's go to flies. Everybody wants to talk about flies. Before I get started, this book will change your life if you're a smallmouth fisherman. This is Smallmouth by Landwehr and Kargatzian something. This is Tightlines fly fishing out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. They wrote this book. It is the book on smallmouth tactics. I've read so many of them. This is the book on tactics. This teaches you how to fish and why to fish your flies a certain way. So let's talk about top water. This is top water bite starts when the water is warmer, above 60. And as the water warms, the fish are generally more cooperative on the top. It is the fun way to go after them. When they're taken on the top, some of the top water flies that I like using, these are called a Mr. Wiggly over here, and the gurgler is on the far side. The boogle bugs are purchased. They're a balsa wood popper. These things last forever, and for some reason, the smallmouth love them. And I've got a source that you can buy seconds for like a third of the price of normal boogle bugs. Here's some different kind of topwater poppers. And this is a stealth bomber in the middle. If you're not familiar with that pattern, that's a folded foam pattern. It is lethal for largemouth, and it's great for smallmouth. These are some Chuck Craft patterns that are made of cork. They're crazy heavy to cast, but they have certain times when smallmouth will trigger when the fly drops on the water. And that sound when that cork is like throwing a baseball in the water, and it can be just an incredible, it can provoke an incredible reaction. In top water, there are most of the time when you're fishing top water, no motion is the best. Most of the time, fishing at drag freight like you might a trout fly, you want to drift it along structure, and maybe just twitch it enough to twitch the legs. There's times when chugging a topwater popper works great, especially when the metabolism is jacked, and that's just stupid fun. But most of the time, Leave it be. Just let it drift. The biggest fish take it on just sipping it. You will not notice the fly is gone. It just disappears. I talked about that. The slap of the fly is often what they'll trigger on. And in the case of those floating minnows, you want to pulse them. And again, they take on the pause. Before I leave topwater, I'm just going to mention the dry dropper is crack to smallmouth. If you want to go down to the river and have a lot of fun, just take a gurgler and a chartreuse woolly worm, dropper that maybe 18, 20 inches off. Great. Okay, middle column. My very favorite fly is the shimmering minnow. This was designed by Brian Shoemaker. He's a guide in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He's a good friend. He's a friend of Bob Clauser. The shimmering minnows are here. You can see, like, I've got almost a whole section of my box that's devoted to them. And here's a picture of my box. Let's go here. You can see that I favor the chartreuse and yellow shimmering minnow and the whites, but I fish them in other colors as well. But if you were to come on my drift boat, there's going to be 2 rods, floating lines rigged. One's going to have a chartreuse and yellow, and one's going to have a white. And we'll switch on those, and generally they'll prefer one or the other. These are some other suspending flies that are common. The Game Changers one that's a suspending fly. These are mid-column, meaning that deep fly. You want to retrieve in a variable way, not a predictable way. So strip, 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 pause in between all of them. They always are going to eat on the pause. We talked about having a line tight. We talked about having it hover. We talked about having it 90 degrees to the current. I don't know why all those work, but it's often the minor twitch. It's not the retrieve when you chase them away that gets the take. If they're eating high, floating lines work great. And sometimes we'll go to intermediates and sinking lines. And there's certain kinds of hovering flies that float that are intended to be used with sinking lines so that you pull when you retrieve, the fly dives. When you let it go, it raises. And these can be awesome to fish under log jams because you can get the fly low and then float it up into the structure, then pull it down. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about sight fishing because these suspending flies, they're amazing tools for sight fishing. So this is true if you're up waiting, you can see the fly, but it's really true if you're on the drift boat or some boat that's high. Is what you'll notice is you'll watch your fly and there it gets a shadow, a dark shadow. The smallmouth will attack from below and behind. They'll begin to track the fly from below, like a submarine. The first thing you'll notice is it looks like the fly has a shadow. That the game is on when you got a shadow. The smallmouth is going to track that fly. It could track it for 30, 40 feet. And now the game is what induces it to eat that fly. And what's the funnest thing, it's the funnest damn thing, is what do? Do you strip it? Do you wiggle your tip? Do you really, or do you let it sink? What's the answer? I don't know. I watched the fish. I watch the fish and I love this game. Is what I'm doing is I'm playing the fish. And if I see him react, I give him more. Okay. If he reacts on the pause, I give it more. If he goes away, I start to retrieve it. It is so fun. And sometimes, like I said, they'll follow it right to the boat. When they see the boat, they're gone. Okay. Uh, and and so I can't solve the puzzle. It doesn't solve the same way for every fish, but I can tell you it's the funnest, it is the coolest thing ever, is to fish with these suspending flies. Also on top water, how do you induce them? Because it's all sight fishing. Okay, lower column. The most famous fly in the world is the Clouser minnow for lower fishing. And that's Bob on my old Labro drift boat. When he came to the club for our 10th anniversary, I was able to guide him for a day and a half. That was way, way cool. And oh, by the way, I learned loads by sitting right behind him on the rower's seat and watching how he retrieved. He does not retrieve the fly like I do. He's a master at it. It's all about the retrieve. These are some sinking flies that are intent. I call them dredgers. They go low, and you can get varieties of weights. And you're going to see in my box that we have Clouser minnows that kind of sink kind of slow. But I've got these meat whistles up here. That is a 35 to 50 grain fly. It's really heavy. That thing, if it hits you on the back of your head, you're going to see Jesus. You know, it really hurts. And I also tie them a variety of weights. Okay. But these are when you need to really get down. They're tools to get down. Some more of my sinking flies. Okay. So when we're fishing lower column, if you've got a floating line, you want a really long leader. Leaders up here, flies down there. Okay. Jake Vilwalk talked about his strategy for that. Sinking lines can be really helpful to get down, and there's reasons to use sinking lines to get really far down. There's reasons to use a floating line because of the way it responds to the retrieve, right? Okay, floating line is going to pull the fly up. Sinking line is going to pull it down. Okay. Now, slow retrieve, crawling them around the bottom really works well. But I need to caution you is if you're snagging the bottom, chances are you don't have any tension to the fly. If you have zero tension to that fly will find every crevice between rocks. You will lose flies like a banshee. Okay, you need some tension. If you find that you're getting hung up all the time, my bet is that you don't have enough tension on that fly. You should feel the fly bouncing over the rocks. You will, if you hook a log, that fly's gone. There's no way in hell it's coming out of a log. So I didn't have a good place to put this, so I'm going to just talk about it here. Is for most of the flies with jigging action, top water, I'm using a non-slip loop. If you don't know what that knot is, look it up, learn how to tie that knot. It is really hard to learn to tie, to get it tight. So you've got to really get this knot tight, or it'll come apart and you're going to lose your fly. And my advice too is to not, if you read a book, it's going to tell you to put 5 wraps on that non-slip loop. cheat lower. Three will work. I fished with a guide and he used one. Right? But if you're finding that your non-slip loops are coming apart, you're putting too many loops in them and you're not getting them tight. Okay, let's talk about crayfish. They have their own category. Crayfish are 60 to 90% of the smallmouth's diet. So some crayfish flies that I use. This one, the olive woolly bugger, is a crayfish fly. And in our fly fishing school, we always recommend olive woolly bugger, good one to start with. Shallow water, use it. It works for crayfish. They take it for a crayfish. This is the meat whistle I mentioned before, John Bar fly. This is full of lead. They're really heavy. Great crayfish fly. These are some of Josh Filter's flies, these crystal buggers. Here's some variety of crayfish. This is Blaine Chocolate's crayfish. The foxy red minnow that Jack Littleton talked about in the Carp Talk. This is Clauser's crayfish. This is the CK crayfra, Chuck Kraft. And this is an invention on the Chemung River. Now, crayfish, when you fish them, you want the crayfish just above the bottom. They'll slow crawl, dead drift, and hop and pause. That's the way crayfish works. In shallow water, this is easy to do with a floating line and lighter flies. In deeper water, that's when it gets trickier. That's when you need a floating line with a really long leader, or you need to go to sink tips and get down. Okay? Now, one way that works really well is to go with like a nymph type rig where it's all tippet underneath the water and use an indicator, just like you would for trout nymphing. And you can retrieve that and give some action to the fly. But I want to talk to you just a little bit about something I've been experimenting with is using the Euro nymphing setup for smallmouth. So this rod here that I've got is a 4-weight 10'10" Diamondback, Joe Goodspeed. And I've got it set up with standard kind of Euro rig leader, long leader. Why did we want that? Is we can use a really small tippet that'll allow that crayfish to sink quickly. That Euro nymph outfit will allow me to feel the bottom and adjust the angle as I track the bottom. Now, what happens is we can use a heavy fly, and I'm going to talk about this next slide, and we can bump the rocks on the bottom, which is going to make a sound similar to the way the crayfish clicks when it snaps its tail, just like a shrimp. Okay, so this method allows you to tap the bottom. Problem with the Euro rig is it's got a really fine tip on the rod, and it makes it really easy to feel the bottom, but it makes it really hard to get a hook set. And so the only way you can get a hook set, this is a bit of an experiment for me, is I found is a sweep hard downstream. Keep in mind though, if the smallmouth has the vice grips on your fly, you're going to not probably set hard enough. I have found in experimenting so far with this outfit that it's really, really promising, but my land percent is for every fish I hook, I'm probably landing 1 out of 4. Okay. But I'll take that because I'm getting a lot more takes on it. Now, one of the flies, and you can see this later, is that this Joe Goodspeed's mini claw. He just posted a video of this like a month ago. And I had to buy his flies and figure out how he tied them. Like, and so you had the benefit of actually seeing him tie it. But this is a smallmouth fly. Actually, Joe ties and sells this through Fulling Mill as a trout fly. So they're available in trout sizes, 10, 8, 6s. I've scaled up the fly for a size 4 hook, which makes a pretty heavy fly. And it fishes really well if you're going to use a standard outfit or the Euro outfit. And you can get monster deep with this if you throw a sinking line on. But experiments underway. I've been playing with it for about a year. And I'll be playing more with it. Okay. The jig heads. So these are built on a Wapsi super jig head. So the size 4 is 16th. I think. Don't quote me on it. Size 6 comes in 2 sizes, and no, it's not an 1/8. That would really hurt. Yeah. Yeah. It's not an 1/8. An 1/8 is really heavy. Oh, by the way, one of the best parts, one of the parts about smallmouth fishing is there's opportunities to go after carp. And if you go on my drift boat, there's always a carp rod at the ready. Okay, let's talk about equipment. Is for these flies, they can get pretty big. So you know that the rod, the line weight is there to allow us to cast flies of a certain size. So for smallmouth, 6, 7, and 8 are your game plan. If you're fishing smaller streams, 7 is a good one, maybe 6. If you're just getting started, use what you got. If you got a 6 weight, that's what you fish, right? Don't go buy a rod. But you will find on my drift boat that I'm going to be bringing 4 rigged rods. 3 of them will be 8 weights, and 1 will be a 7. The 2 8s will have a floating line, 1 will have an intermediate line, and the 7 will have a floating line. If you've already got a line, fine, use it. And longer tapers are better for stealth. If you have a standard weight forward floating line and you need to go deep, you can do it with a long leader and a heavy fly. You can always add a Versatip sinking tip to it, and you can go have battle with a weight forward line. If all you have is trout gear, don't hesitate to go out. That's John Lively, pair of wading boots down in the Chemung. Go out in the summertime, in the evening, get your tennis shoes, get your olive woolly bugger, your 5 weight. Just don't try to cast big stuff with it. You can have a lot of fun. However, if you decide to get into it, specialized lines really help. And they'll expand your capability. And so what I mean by that is the so-called integrated head lines. So shooting head integrated in a running line. Rio makes Predator outbound short. I think I've got some other. Yes. So Rio makes a Predator outbound short. Other companies make these heavy head lines. Why you'd want to use those is that the oversized head has a lot of turnover power. So you can take these big flies and you can throw them, and you don't false cast with these lines. 1, 2, and it's gone. Okay. So it's gonna you'll have to learn how to cast with a slow, methodical casting stroke, but you don't need to false cast these lines. It puts your fly in the water a lot longer, and you'll find those on all the rods in my drift boat. Now, it is true that these heavy-headed lines, they're not really good at accuracy. They're really good at distance and turnover. So if you're finding troubles with accuracy, that's where the longer head lines are way more stealthy and accurate. And this is when sink lines come in really handy. Okay, and like I said, I fish a range of these, and it just depends on the conditions. And then I always have extra spools in the boat. So if things are different than what I thought, we're not going to go home with no fish. Okay, so just to show you how much of a over the top I am, this is my garage. I always have, there's 12 tubes in the rack if you want to count them, but there's usually 2 others hanging around. So there's usually 14 rods ready to go. The car's here.
Outside.
No, this lives on the ceiling. I've got a porch here on the garage, so I can get to them really easy. That's Cynthia's van. I'm relegated to the other side. But my Highlander, if you were to go out in front, this is what you'd see. So I have rod racks, so they go right out of the garage onto the rod rack and then right into the drift boat. So I keep them rigged and ready. So if you call up, I want to go smallmouth fishing, we just pull the rods out and we go. Okay, there's a little bit more about leaders. I hand tie all my leaders. I use the Lefty Cray formula, which has a 50%, but it works really well. Lately I've been playing around with the Seagar Abrase fluoro, which is a low-cost fluoro tippet, and had real good luck with that. And with sinking lines, you don't need very long a leader. You want a short leader. And all we're doing here is just using fluoro tippet. Okay, last section. Let's talk about smallmouth as a resource. Smallmouth grow really slowly. If you were to catch an 18-inch fish in the river, that's fish in our water is 10 to 15 years old. Okay. The smallmouth, like other types of bass, is once they reach about 16 to 18 inches, they get fatter and they get slightly longer. If you catch a 20-inch fish, okay, 21-inch fish, you're poking at world record. Okay. So, but the point of this slide is to get you to understand, to reach sizes like we find in the Shamong, a 4 or 5 pound fish is 15 years old. Okay. If you harvest that fish, or if that fish dies because you handled it incorrectly, we lose 15 years. I've seen people with stringers of 5 pound fish they're harvesting out of the Shamong. That's 65 years of fish gone in one stringer. So help us all. These are very precious resource, and please catch and release and handle them with care. Learn how to handle them. So with smallmouth and largemouth too, is if you lip these fish, it will kind of numb them and they will not fight you. It is the way to unhook them. Okay. Now, smallmouth and largemouth are just like a dog. If they sense you're not committed, they're going to wiggle around. You want to go in with a good attitude and just lip them and grip them tightly. If you do, that lipping will relax the fish, hold them vertical, and get the hook out. Always net the larger fish. Really important is you want to land that fish as fast as you can. You want to get that fish in the net as fast as you can. I should have talked about this before. It's the same is true with largemouth. Don't let the fish jump. If that fish jumps, it's going to has a really good chance of throwing the hook. If you can, you want to keep that fish from jumping. What do I mean by that? Is I'm fighting the fish. I can feel the line raising up where he's beginning to come out of the water. When I'm in the drift boat, that means the tip goes down into the water, deep bend, and I'm pulling hard to the side. I'm trying to pull as hard as I possibly can to keep him from jumping. A lot of times you can prevent him from jumping and he'll stay hooked. Same true with smallmouth. Now, if he jumps, you did everything you could to keep him from going up. But you want to get him into the net as quickly as possible. Don't screw around with him. Don't try to strip him in. If you've got a lot of line hanging out, forget about it. Just strip him in and get him in the damn net, okay? Don't go, oh, I got to get him on the reel. No, you don't. They're not going to make a lunge and bolt. They might make a lunge and you might have to let some line slip, but don't try to get them on the reel. Strip, 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 and get them in the net. And don't drag them on the rocks, please, please, please. Take care of the resource. Now, this is really important. True for if largemouth as well. Problem with the bass, the bass car guys, the competitive anglers, they've popularized catch and release, thank God. But one of the things they popularized is the fish lip hold. Okay. And I don't know why that's so stupid popular. If I were a king, they'd have a competition, they measure the fish, they release the fish, no harm for the fish. Okay. But what happens is our friends think they're bass car guys, and they hold them by the lip like this, and they break their jaws. Okay. If you're going to hold a fish, lip them like this. I think I've got a picture with Kayla. Nope. Hold them straight up. Hold them straight up. If you want a photo and you want them horizontal, hold the lip and one hand underneath. Okay. But don't break their jaw. Same with largemouth. All right. So please catch and release. That's my granddaughter. All right. Questions? Sorry about the computer problem. Do we have questions online?
Nope, no one has said anything.
You didn't mention Krelix. Got an answer. These are all Krelixes. Okay. So, the standard color, the Chris Walker special is the bronze and copper. That's the basic. But the Krelixes in pearl and silver, I fish, and these darker colors I fish. I still find in the times when you've got a really bright day, the Krelix in its standard color, it can be nirvana. Okay. In dark days, these darker flights can be good. So people have talked about the Krelix as like the MEPS of fly fishing, right? And that may be true. This thing can catch fish, and it's really good trout fly too, as your son will testify. In these colors, what I would point out to you is one of the benefits of this design is that this material is really flexible. It has no stiffness hardly at all. One of the values of that fly is not discussed much, but from a physics point of view, when this thing sinks with a loop knot, it's going to dip like this. But this, with the bucktail, like in a Clouser minnow, that'll keep it from sinking. It'll actually slow the sink rate down. But this will like parachute up, and it'll drop like a rock. Okay, so I like the Krelix. I fish it. I don't fish it as often as I fish the suspending flies, but there's times when Krelix nirvana, and absolutely, if you got a little time, go over to Denison Park, go over the dike there in an evening, throw this, throw foxy red minnow, throw an olive woolly bugger. Cool. What else? Mhm. But Mike, you make a really good point that I didn't make in the stealth. When that fly line splashes down on the water, it is like a lightning storm because they're used to looking up at mirror surface, and that fly line comes down and it just flashes light all over the place. It splashes down. It makes a hell of a disturbance. In conditions where it's really slow water, this is like, it's a big damn deal. The fish see a lot of eagles and osprey and such, so they don't know the difference between that. They know when something splashes down, bad's going to happen, right? So one of the aspects of making your first cast count is you've got the sneak attack. But after you've thrown like 20 casts into that area, you've really you're just like whaling bombs on them. Especially if it's in faster water, it doesn't matter as much. but in slow water, it matters a whole lot. So it's a good point. Yeah, and so in my drift boat, we're trying to cover as much water. And so what we'll do is one cast to a spot, right? So usually if I'm rowing, I call the spot because we spend a lot of time getting to set up for that spot. I don't want you not to know it. Hit that boulder. It's your best shot is that first cast. And after that cast delivers, we're moving along, so we're getting ready for the next cast. Some of the people in my boat will like not listen to my advice, and they think there's a fish there, and they throw it back in there, and generally they get yelled at because we're trying to go to the next spot. But some of those people have this uncanny luck of getting that fish to eat on the second cast and making me look bad. Other,
We do have a question here. It says, how do you determine the speed and rate to strip? Is it specific to the species?
specific to this, yeah. Well, so we're talking about smallmouth, but it's still a good question. Is if you can see them, that like when you're fishing a suspending fly, if the fish are interested, you're going to see them track the fly. If they're tracking the fly and they're not eating the fly, you know the retrieve is what to change. So I always retrieve and change the retrieve first. And if necessary, if they're not eating the fly, then I'll change the fly. Usually go smaller or go to a different color. But if I can see the fish, then I'm going to change, and they're not eating. If I can't see the fish, that's when it gets interesting because you got to surmise. And hey, if you're not catching fish, you're doing something wrong. So if you're not catching fish, then slow it down. Slow it down and slow the retrieve down to a crawl. If you can't see the fish, you can't see the fly, you're fishing deep. If that doesn't work, then it's time to start changing flies, going smaller, that kind of thing. Other questions? Cool. I think we're going to put a fork in it and call it done.